On a warm golden afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the sun filtered softly through the leaves of tall oak trees, casting playful shadows on the neatly trimmed lawns. Birds chirped in the distance, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass. In the backyard of a small yellow house, little Lily was happily playing on her favorite picnic blanket. At just 18 months old, Lily was a tiny bundle of curiosity and joy, always eager to explore the world around her. Her mother, Emily, sat nearby on a folding chair, keeping a watchful eye while scrolling through her phone. Emily was grateful for this peaceful moment after a busy week at work. She smiled as she watched Lily clutch her beloved plush bunny, a gift from her grandmother, her soft fingers tracing the bunny's worn ears. Lily's chubby cheeks glowed in the afternoon sun as she babbled happily to herself, occasionally breaking into a toothy grin. Not far from the yard, in the neighboring street, Max, a majestic German shepherd, was enjoying his afternoon walk with his owner. Max was well known in the neighborhood, a gentle giant with a heart as big as his muscular frame. His thick black and tan coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his intelligent eyes sparkled with mischief and warmth. Today, however, Max was a little more restless than usual. His sharp ears twitched at every noise, and his nose twitched at the smells carried by the breeze. Suddenly, a quick movement caught Max's attention. A squirrel darting across a wooden fence, disappearing into a narrow alley between two houses. Max's instincts kicked in, and before his owner could stop him, Max broke free, chasing after the small creature with the boundless energy only a dog could have. The narrow alley was a forgotten space, a maze of old brick walls, rusted tools, and scattered leaves. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, let alone a large dog. Max's powerful legs carried him swiftly forward, paws thudding against cracked concrete. The squirrel disappeared around a corner, and Max followed without hesitation. But as Max tried to navigate the narrowest part of the alley, between two crumbling brick walls, disaster struck. The gap was just slightly smaller than Max's broad body. His front legs slipped through, but his hind legs got stuck. Max was wedged tightly, the walls pressing against his sides, cold and unyielding. Panic surged through Max's chest as he struggled to free himself. His heavy breathing echoed in the tight space, and his barks were muffled by the brick walls. The more he wriggled, the more trapped he became. Fear replaced his usual confidence. Meanwhile, back in the yard, Lily's attention was drawn to a faint, unfamiliar sound, a low, distressed whimper. Her little ears perked up, and her playful babbling ceased. She turned her head, trying to locate the source of the noise. Lily crawled slowly, leaving behind her plush bunny toward the edge of the yard closest to the alley. Emily noticed the sudden change in her daughter's behavior and immediately followed her. "Lily, wait!" she called softly, but Lily's determination was clear. The baby's wide eyes reflected a mixture of curiosity and concern as she approached the narrow alley. Lily's tiny hands reached out instinctively toward the source of the sound, her fingers touching the rough bricks. The muffled whines grew, louder as Max shifted his weight, trying to get closer to the baby's touch. The connection was fragile but undeniable. A scared dog and a compassionate baby reaching out to each other in a world that suddenly felt much bigger. Emily finally reached the corner of the yard, her heart pounding as she saw Max trapped between the two walls. The sight broke her breath. The dog's large body was stuck so tightly that even she wasn't sure how to help. She knelt beside Lily, gently taking her hand while scanning the area for a solution. The afternoon light grew dimmer, shadows lengthening across the alley. Emily pulled out her phone and quickly dialed the local animal rescue service. "There's a dog trapped in a narrow alley," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. "He's stuck between two brick walls and can't move. We need help." As she spoke, Lily remained at the edge of the alley, softly cooing and babbling to Max. The dog's eyes softened as he looked into the innocent face of the tiny baby. For a moment, the fear seemed to fade, replaced by a fragile calm. Neighbors began to notice the gathering crowd. Curious faces peeked from windows and doorways. Max's plight and Lily's gentle response were quietly weaving a story that would soon touch every heart in the neighborhood. But the question remained, How would they free Max before the daylight faded, and before the walls that trapped him gave way to danger? Lily's wide, innocent eyes stared intently at the narrow alley, where Max's desperate whimpers echoed faintly against the brick walls. Her tiny hands were still reaching forward, fingers brushing the rough edges of the stones, as if trying to comfort the trapped dog. The baby's world was simple, a place where kindness was instinctive and pain was met with compassion. Emily held Lily gently but firmly, whispering reassurances to calm both her daughter and herself. She couldn't ignore the growing knot in her stomach. Max had been stuck for what felt like an eternity already, and the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. The dog's thick chest rose and fell rapidly, his breath shallow, his body trembling. The sound of Max's whines caught the attention of Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly woman from next door, who had just stepped out to water her flowers. Seeing Emily and Lily at the edge of the alley, she hurried over, worry etched across her face. "What's going on?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, peering into the narrow space. "There's a dog stuck," Emily explained, her voice tight. "He's trapped between those two walls, and I called animal control, but it might take some time for them to arrive." Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes softened as she looked at Lily, who was now babbling softly at Max, her small voice almost like a lullaby. "That baby already knows what to do," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "Sometimes the smallest hearts can teach us the biggest lessons." Emily smiled weakly, grateful for the kindness, but her mind raced for a solution. She looked around and noticed other neighbors emerging. A few teenagers, a couple of parents with children, and even Mr. Thompson, the local handyman, with a toolbox slung over his shoulder. Word had spread quickly, and the neighborhood was rallying quietly, but with a growing sense of urgency. The alley where Max was trapped was dangerously narrow, and the old brick walls looked brittle, ready to crumble at the slightest pressure. Meanwhile, Lily was fearless. She wriggled from Emily's grasp, her tiny feet pattering lightly on the concrete as she crawled closer to the gap. She reached out and touched Max's fur through a small crack, the dog's coarse coat brushing against her delicate fingers. Max's eyes flickered with recognition and relief. "Good girl, Lily," Emily said softly, scooping her daughter into her arms again. She didn't want her baby so close to danger, but she couldn't help but feel awe at Lily's instinctive bravery. The sound of an engine interrupted the quiet. Animal control was on its way, but traffic was heavy, and Emily knew they wouldn't arrive for at least 20 minutes. Time was running out. Max shifted again, struggling to adjust his position. His legs were numb and sore, and the rough bricks scraped painfully against his sides. He whimpered softly, his big eyes searching desperately for hope. Lily's small voice rose in a gentle, soothing coo. She babbled to Max, her tone full of warmth and comfort. The dog calmed, leaning his head toward her touch. It was as if the baby's innocent love was a lifeline, steadying him in the darkest moment. Emily wiped away a tear, overwhelmed by the bond unfolding before her eyes. "You're doing great, Max," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Hold on just a little longer." Neighbors gathered closer, their faces filled with concern and admiration. A teenage boy, Daniel, offered to call his father, who was a vet. Another woman fetched water to keep Max hydrated through the small opening, using a bottle and a straw. Minutes dragged like hours. The sun began to dip lower, the alley growing colder and shadows longer. Yet, despite the looming danger, the connection between Lily and Max remained unbroken. The baby's fearless innocence and the dog's desperate need for comfort created a silent conversation that transcended words. Emily crouched beside her daughter, holding her hand and encouraging her soft babbles. "You're a little hero, Lily," she said quietly, kissing her forehead. At that moment, a sudden noise startled the crowd. A loose brick from one of the walls tumbled to the ground. Gasps filled the air. The old structure was fragile, and any sudden movement might collapse the alley, trapping Max further or worse. The neighbors exchanged worried glances. They needed a plan, and fast. "Let's keep the area calm and quiet," Mrs. Rodriguez advised firmly. "No sudden moves, no loud noises." Emily nodded, her heart pounding. She looked down at Lily, whose eyes sparkled despite the tension. The baby's tiny fingers reached again toward the wall, touching Max's nose gently. Max closed his eyes briefly, letting the small touch soothe him. He was exhausted, frightened, and in pain, but this little light, this baby, gave him hope. Help was on its way, but the real rescue had already begun. Emily's heart pounded harder than ever as she watched Lily's innocent interactions with Max. The little baby, unaware of how serious the situation was, continued to babble and reach out to the trapped dog, her tiny hand brushing against the rough bricks and, whenever possible, the soft fur she could feel through the narrow gap. Emily knelt beside her daughter, her eyes darting between Max's frightened gaze and the narrow space that held him captive. The realization of the danger gripped her. Max was wedged so tightly that even his deep breath seemed to require effort. She tried calling softly, "Max, hang on. Help is coming." But her words were swallowed by the walls. The dog's muffled whimpers were all she could hear in return. Looking around, Emily spotted the neighbors, who had formed a loose circle around the alley. Each person wore an expression of helpless concern. Mr. Thompson, the handyman, inspected the bricks carefully, testing their stability with cautious taps. "This wall's pretty fragile," he muttered, shaking his head. "Any sudden pressure could bring it down." Emily swallowed hard. If the walls collapsed, Max could be crushed or trapped even worse. Her mind raced. How could they safely get Max out? Nearby, Daniel, the teenage boy who had called his vet father, had returned with news. They're on their way but stuck in traffic, maybe another 30 minutes. 30 minutes felt like an eternity. Lily suddenly began to babble more loudly, grabbing Emily's attention. The baby's eyes were fixed on Max, and her small fingers reached again through a tiny opening in the wall. Max, as if understanding. The baby's gentle spirit leaned into her touch, a soft whine escaping his throat. Emily's eyes filled with tears. The connection between a tiny baby and a frightened dog seemed almost magical. She stroked Lily's hair softly. "You're doing something special, Lily." The neighbors watched in awe. Mrs. Rodriguez whispered, "Sometimes it's the purest hearts that make all the difference." The sun was beginning to dip behind the houses, casting long shadows that stretched across the alley. A cool breeze drifted in, and Emily wrapped a blanket tighter around Lily, shielding her from the chill. She tried to keep calm for her daughter's sake, but the knot of worry in her chest tightened. Suddenly a sharp sound shattered the quiet. A brick loosened and fell to the ground, scattering dust into the air. Gasps echoed as everyone stepped back quickly. Mr. Thompson looked grim. "We need to be extremely careful. Any wrong move might cause a collapse." Emily glanced down at Lily, who still reached out bravely, babbling encouragement to Max. They sigh. Baby's simple faith in the dog's safety was a balm for the tense group. Emily's phone buzzed. It was a message from Animal Control. "We're close but stuck behind an accident on the highway, ETA 20 minutes. She exhaled deeply, trying to steady her shaking hands. The rescue team was so near, yet so far. Suddenly, Lily wriggled free, again crawling toward the alley despite Emily's gentle hold. "Lily, wait," Emily called, but the baby was driven by an instinct far greater than her size or understanding. She was drawn to Max, to the scared dog who needed her. Emily hurried after her, heart in her throat. When she reached Lily, she saw the baby lean down and softly blow a gentle breath through the crack in the wall, as if sharing her own warmth. Max's ears twitched. He closed his eyes briefly, calming as if soothed by Lily's breath. Emily gently picked Lily up, holding her close. "You're such a brave little girl," she whispered. The neighbors exchanged glances. The baby's presence was more than comforting. It was keeping Max calm, steady, and hopeful. Daniel's vet father arrived moments later, carrying a small bag of supplies. He knelt beside Emily and examined the situation carefully. "We have to be patient," he said quietly. "The walls won't hold much more. We can't rush this." The group nodded silently. Everyone understood. Rushing would put Max in greater danger. Emily looked down at Lily, who was now quiet, resting her head against her mother's chest. The baby's innocence, courage, and compassion had created a fragile but unbreakable bond with Max, the trapped dog. Minutes stretched on. The dog's soft whimpers grew fainter as exhaustion took hold, but Lily's tiny hand never stopped reaching, never stopped offering comfort. Emily whispered a prayer, hoping their help would come before it was too late. The sun dipped lower behind the houses, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The alley where Max was trapped grew cooler and darker with every passing minute. Emily's heart felt heavy as she watched the dog's labored breathing, the tension thick in the air. Max was exhausted, his eyes half closed, but still flickering, with alertness whenever Lily's tiny hand touched his fur through the narrow crack. The baby's babbling had softened to a gentle hum, a lullaby only Max could understand. His enormous head rested against the rough bricks, comforted by the faint warmth her little fingers gave him. The neighborhood gathered in a quiet circle, each person holding their breath, waiting for the professionals to arrive. Mr. Thompson. The handyman paced nervously. His face was lined with worry, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "We have to be very careful. The walls won't hold if we try to force Max out. We need a plan that won't cause the whole thing to collapse." Daniel's father, the vet, nodded thoughtfully, glancing over Max's strained form. "If we can gently loosen the bricks without shaking the walls too much, we might be able to create enough space to pull him out." Emily swallowed hard, the knot in her throat tightening. "But how do we keep Max calm? If he panics, he could hurt himself." Daniel's father looked toward Lily, who was now curled up in Emily's arms, her eyes heavy with sleep but still occasionally reaching toward the dog. "That little girl is doing more for Max than anyone else," he said quietly. "Her presence is calming him." Emily smiled sadly. "She's amazing. I just hope we can keep him safe." Just then, a distant siren broke through the quiet neighborhood. The animal control team had finally arrived. Relief flooded Emily's chest. Within moments, 2 rescue workers stepped into the alleyway, carrying specialized tools designed for delicate extractions. They moved carefully, setting up a small light to illuminate the tight space. The vet knelt beside Max, speaking softly to soothe him. "You're safe now, boy. We're going to get you out." Max's eyes fluttered open and locked briefly on Lily, who reached out one last time to touch his nose before yawning and resting her head against Emily's chest. The baby's bravery and kindness had created a bridge of hope in the darkest moment. The rescue workers began their delicate work, chiseling away at the mortar between the bricks with steady hands. Dust rose in thin clouds, but the walls held firm. Everyone watched in silence, the tension almost unbearable. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the alley as a loose brick shifted precariously. Gasps erupted from the crowd. "Easy, easy," one rescuer warned, motioning for calm. Emily's breath caught as she held Lily tighter. She saw Max flinch, but not panic. The dog's trust in the people around him, and maybe in the baby, seemed to anchor him. Minutes passed with painstaking slowness. The rescuers created just enough room for one of them to reach in and gently wrap an arm around Max's chest. Max let out a soft whine but didn't struggle. His body was too tired, and the calm from Lily's presence seemed to keep him steady. With careful strength, they began to ease Max backward through the opening. The walls groaned but held. Finally, Max's broad shoulders slipped free, then his legs, until at last he was out of the narrow trap and lying on the soft grass beyond the alley. Exhausted but safe. Emily sighed in relief, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lily, still nestled in her arms, opened her eyes and smiled faintly. Max looked up at the baby, his dark eyes full of gratitude. The vet quickly checked Max over, praising the dog's resilience. "He's going to be okay. Just needs rest and some love." Neighbors gathered closer, some clapping quietly, others wiping tears from their eyes. What had started as a frightening rescue had become a story of hope, courage, and unexpected heroes. Emily looked down at Lily, who reached out to gently stroke Max's head. The baby's simple act of kindness had given the dog the strength to hold on, a reminder that sometimes the smallest souls can make the biggest difference. As Max rested in the soft grass, finally free from the walls that had trapped him, Emily whispered softly to her daughter, "You saved him, Lily, you really did." The baby's bright eyes twinkled, unaware of the gravity of her bravery, but full of the purest love. And in that quiet moment, beneath the fading sunset, everyone knew they had witnessed something truly special. Max lay on the soft grass, his body still trembling slightly from the ordeal. The fresh air and gentle sunlight seemed to soothe his bruised muscles and aching spirit. The once-trapped German Shepherd was finally free, but his journey to full recovery was just beginning. Emily cradled Lily close to her chest, still overwhelmed by the tiny baby's courage and the miracle they had witnessed. She looked down at her daughter's sleepy face and felt a surge of pride. How could such a small child make such a huge difference? It was as if Lily's pure-hearted nature had reached across to Max, calming him when all else seemed lost. The steward carefully examined Max, his fingers tracing bruises and scrapes. "He's lucky," he said softly. "German Shepherds are strong, but that tight space could have caused serious damage. We'll need to keep him calm and monitor him closely." Emily nodded, her eyes never leaving Max. "What can I do to help him heal?" "Rest, love, and patience," the vet replied, "and lots of water and good food once he's up to it." Max looked up with tired eyes and gave a soft whine. His gaze shifted to Lily, who was now reaching out to touch his nose again, her chubby fingers trembling slightly but filled with gentle determination. Emily smiled through tears. "You two already have a special bond," she said. As the sun continued to set, neighbors lingered, offering blankets, towels, and soft treats for Max. Daniel, the teenage boy, sat beside Emily and Lily, sharing stories about Max's kind nature, how he had once helped a lost child find their way home, and was beloved by everyone in the neighborhood. "It's like he was meant to be here today," Daniel said quietly. "And Lily too," Emily nodded. "Sometimes the smallest heroes make the biggest impact." The quiet yard filled with warmth and gratitude as people connected through the shared relief of Max's safe rescue. Later that evening, Emily brought Max into her home, carefully helping him up the steps. Lily, now drowsy but alert, followed with her mother's support, clutching her plush bunny. Max settled on a soft blanket near the fireplace, where the gentle crackle of flames added a comforting rhythm to the room. Lily crawled over, her eyes wide with fascination and love. She reached out and touched Max's soft fur, and the dog responded with a gentle nuzzle. Emily watched them, her heart swelling. The bond between her baby and Max was undeniable, a silent promise of friendship and healing. Over the next days, Emily dedicated herself to Max's recovery. She made sure he had plenty of water and nutritious food, and she arranged quiet spaces where he could rest without being disturbed. Lily's presence continued to be a soothing influence. Whenever Max stirred or seemed uneasy, Lily's gentle touch and quiet babbling helped calm him. One afternoon, Emily noticed something remarkable. Max was no longer just tolerating Lily's touch, and he was seeking it. He would lean into her tiny hands, resting his head on her lap as she giggled with delight. It was as if Max knew he owed his life to the baby's bravery and kindness, and he was repaying her with unwavering trust. Emily shared the story on social media, and soon the tale of Lily and Max spread far beyond the neighborhood. Messages poured in from people moved by the unlikely friendship between a tiny baby and a big dog. One message stood out from a local animal shelter offering to support Max's ongoing care, inspired by the story of hope and compassion. Emily felt a deep sense of connection. What had started as a terrifying day had blossomed into something extraordinary, a community coming together, lives changed, and a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, could create miracles. That night, as Lily slept peacefully beside Max, Emily whispered a quiet thanks to the universe. She knew that the days ahead would bring challenges, but also joy, because sometimes the most unexpected moments, like a baby reaching through a crack in a wall to comfort a trapped dog, become the stories that heal us all. The days that followed, Max's rescue were filled with quiet moments of healing and gentle care, but they were also marked by an outpouring of support from the neighborhood. Emily watched in awe as the story of the trapped German Shepherd and the brave baby spread like wildfire, touching hearts far beyond their little street. Messages and offers of help came pouring in. Neighbors brought homemade meals for Emily, and Max, while others donated dog food and supplies. The local animal shelter, inspired by the story, reached out with offers for veterinary support, grooming, and even a commitment to help Max find a forever home if Emily ever needed assistance. Emily felt overwhelmed with gratitude. What had started as a frightening accident had blossomed into a beacon of hope and community spirit. Every kind gesture reminded her of the power of connection and the magic that could happen when people came together. Meanwhile, Max's recovery was progressing steadily. Though still cautious and tender from his ordeal, the once trapped dog began to regain his strength. His dark eyes sparkled with renewed energy, especially when Lily was near. The baby's soft laughter and gentle touch seemed to fill the room with a warmth that Max responded to instinctively. Lily, for her part, continued to be a source of comfort and joy. Even as she took her first unsteady steps around the house, her attention was often drawn back to Max. She babbled stories to him, tugged at his fur playfully, and shared her favorite toys, treating him like a beloved playmate. One afternoon, Emily captured a beautiful moment on video. Lily, in her tiny pink pajamas, sitting beside Max as he rested his head on her lap. The dog's heavy breathing was calm and even, and the baby's soft coos seemed to soothe him even further. The video quickly went viral, capturing the hearts of thousands who marveled at the tender bond between the baby and the dog. As the weeks passed, Max's physical wounds healed, but Emily noticed something more profound taking shape, an unspoken bond that went beyond rescue and recovery. Max was no longer just a dog who had been saved. He was a protector, a gentle guardian for Lily. One evening, as Emily prepared dinner, she heard a soft thud from the living room. She found Lily standing unsteadily near Max's favorite spot, clutching his collar and looking up at him with wide eyes. Max wagged his tail slowly, his large frame a reassuring presence. Lily reached out to touch his face, and he leaned into her tiny hands, eyes filled with trust. Emily smiled, tears of joy prickling at her eyes. "You two are inseparable," she whispered. The community's excitement about the story didn't fade, and with it came an unexpected opportunity. A local journalist who had heard about Max's rescue and Lily's bravery reached out to Emily, asking if she would be willing to share their story for a feature article. At first, Emily hesitated. The events had been deeply personal and emotional, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to put it all in the spotlight. But after talking it over with her family, she realized that sharing the story might inspire others, remind people of the power of kindness, even from the smallest among us. With the support of her neighbors and friends, Emily agreed. The article was published to wide acclaim. It told the story from start to finish. The moment Max became trapped, Lily's fearless attempts to comfort him, the community's efforts to rescue him, and the lasting bond between the baby and the dog. Comments poured in from readers who had been touched by the tale, people sharing their own stories of rescue and friendship, volunteers offering to help animals in need, and parents inspired to teach their children about empathy and courage. Emily felt a quiet pride. What had begun as a frightening, uncertain day had turned into a movement, a reminder that sometimes the smallest hands and the biggest hearts could change the world. And as she watched Lily toddle around the house, always keeping an eye on Max, Emily knew this was just the beginning of their journey together. Life had begun to settle into a gentle rhythm for Emily, Lily, and Max, but healing, both physical and emotional, was rarely a straight path. Though Max was out of danger and thriving in many ways, subtle challenges lingered beneath the surface. Emily noticed that Max sometimes flinched at sudden noises or movements. He avoided tight spaces and would occasionally bark anxiously if he felt trapped or cornered. The trauma of being stuck between the walls had left an invisible scar, one that no bandage could heal. Lily, growing more curious by the day, was quick to notice Max's changes. One afternoon, as Emily prepared lunch, she heard Max growl softly at a passing cat in the yard. Lily, fascinated by Max's reaction, reached out to pet him gently. Max stiffened for a moment, then relaxed under her touch. It was a small victory, a sign that trust was still growing. Emily realized that Max's healing was not just about his body, but also about rebuilding his confidence and sense of safety. She reached out to a local dog behaviorist recommended by the vet, hoping to help Max overcome his fears. The behaviorist, Ms. Alvarez, came to their home a few days later. She observed Max's body language carefully and talked softly to Emily about trauma in animals. Max's experience was terrifying, Ms. Alvarez explained. Even if he's physically healed, his mind needs time and reassurance. The bond with Lily is a strong foundation, but we need to build on it. Emily listened intently as Ms. Alvarez designed a gentle plan. Short positive training sessions, safe spaces for Max to retreat to, and plenty of calm interactions with Lily and the family. The sessions began with small steps. Emily watched as Max learned to relax when Lily made noise nearby or when a door slammed unexpectedly. The dog's progress was slow but steady, like a fragile flower pushing through the cracks of a sidewalk. Meanwhile, Lily continued to be a source of healing, magic. Her innocence and kindness reminded Emily daily that love, patience, and understanding were powerful tools. One day, while Emily was working in the kitchen, she noticed Lily crawling toward Max with her favorite stuffed animal. The baby dropped it beside the dog, then touched his nose gently. Max looked up, and for a moment the world seemed to stand still. It was a quiet reminder that even after pain, trust, and hope could flourish. But life wasn't without its trials. One afternoon, as Emily was walking Max and Lily in the park, a group of rowdy dogs approached. Max growled, tense and protective. Lily, barely able to walk steadily, looked frightened. Emily quickly intervened, pulling Max back and calming the scene. It was a stark reminder that Max's trauma could surface unexpectedly, and vigilance was essential. That evening, Emily sat down with Daniel, the teenage boy who had been so involved. From the beginning, "We need to keep supporting Max," she said softly. "But we also have to protect Lily." Daniel nodded. "He's come a long way, but this isn't over." The community remained a source of strength. Neighbors organized walks and play dates with calm dogs to help Max socialize. They shared tips and encouragement, celebrating every small victory. Through it all, Emily learned a vital lesson. Healing was not about rushing, but about embracing patience and grace. Max, Lily, and Emily were growing together, each teaching the others what it meant to trust again. And as the seasons changed, the once-trapped dog transformed, not just into a survivor, but into a symbol of hope, resilience, and the profound power of kindness. Months had passed since Max's dramatic rescue from between the two walls. What had begun as a terrifying ordeal had blossomed into a journey of healing, growth, and unbreakable bonds. Emily stood in her living room, watching Lily and Max play together. The baby's giggles echoed warmly as she crawled after Max, who wagged his tail with a calm confidence that had once seemed impossible. The scars from the past still lingered, but Max's spirit was stronger than ever. The neighborhood had witnessed a remarkable transformation. Max was no longer the frightened dog trapped in a tight space, but a beloved member of the community who inspired kindness and compassion. Emily thought back to the day it all began, when Lily reached through the narrow crack and touched Max's fur. That simple act of innocence and love had sparked a chain of events that changed many lives. The local animal shelter had helped Max with ongoing care, and now he was not only healthy, but happy. Emily had even begun volunteering there, motivated by the story and eager to give back. Lily, now toddling with newfound confidence, always made sure Max was near. Their bond was extraordinary, a silent understanding that spoke of trust, protection, and endless love. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast a golden glow through the windows, Emily sat with Daniel and her father, reflecting on everything that had happened. "Who would have thought a baby and a dog could teach us all so much?" Daniel said with a smile. Emily nodded. "It's been a hard journey, but one filled with hope." Her father added quietly, "Sometimes it's the smallest hearts that hold the greatest courage." That night, Emily tucked Lily into bed and stroked Max's soft fur as he settled at the foot of the crib. The peaceful scene was a far cry from the tense moments of Max's rescue, but it was a powerful reminder of how far they had come. As Emily turned off the lights, She whispered a promise to herself and to Max that she would protect and cherish this bond, nurture it with love, and never forget the courage that had brought them together. The story of Max and Lily had touched thousands, inspiring people to see the power of kindness in their own lives. Emily received messages from strangers who had been moved to adopt animals in need, volunteer in their communities, or simply reach out with compassion. It was a ripple effect, spreading far beyond the little alley where Max had once been trapped. Emily smiled as she thought about the future, a future where Lily would grow up knowing the strength of empathy and the magic of small acts of bravery. And Max, he was no longer just a rescued dog. He was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the beautiful bond between a baby and a dog who saved each other in ways neither could have imagined. As the moon rose high and the house fell silent, Emily felt a deep peace settle in her heart. Because sometimes the most extraordinary stories are born from the simplest moments of love.